All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about migration, especially not just systems migration, but also user migration and user adoption, user engagement, user just having users actually use the stuff that we put out there. So looking forward to the conversation. I got Ben here with me. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Benjamin Nyland. I'm from Montreal. I work at a company called ShareGate, and of course, we're an ISV. I say, of course, I feel like we've been here for a long time, but not necessarily. No, we do migrations for the most part, but we do governance as well, management. But the reason why we're here today is because I've been working officially 9 years at ShareGate as of last week or this week, I
Wow.
think. Yeah, it's been a while. So I've seen quite a bit of stuff around migrations over the years.
Yes, I'm sure you have. And oh my God, ShareGit has had quite a ride. There's so much data
Yeah.
you guys have about what people are doing right, what they're doing wrong, what they're doing in a hurry, stuff like that. So definitely looking forward to talking about all that stuff. My name is Asif Rahmani. I'm the CEO at VisualSP. And while Ben and ShareGate focus a lot, of course, on systems migration, getting the content, we usually focus on the user side of the story. How do we get the users there successfully and having them actually use all the stuff that we're investing in, right? That's a huge part of the story.
Pretty big part.
So very much looking forward to this conversation. Let's jump right into it. Yeah.
Yep.
One of the first things I wanted to ask you about, Ben, over here is as people are migrating, and obviously they're always migrating, even if it's tenant to tenant and sometimes on-prem to online and whatever within SharePoint or other places, what should be their top priorities when planning for migration?
Yeah, this always a good question because the key part in your question is should.
Should.
And we can talk about the data and what we're seeing. And I'm not saying like I don't want to put anybody on the spot and saying like you're doing it bad. It's not about that because I know the reality. We're a company ourselves, and when it comes time to do certain things, we're like, okay, well, let's just do it. And
Yep.
I totally understand. But ideally, we're really thinking about what about the people productivity, their work, right? If you're migrating, and I have this slide in my sessions often, and I love it because it has two lines. It really has the IT, and I see a line with SharePoint 2007, 2010, and just there's a new version of SharePoint. So
Yeah.
I upgrade the version of SharePoint, never even thinking that hey, maybe I need another software. And of course, I would like everyone. I work in the Microsoft space. I'd like you to stay on SharePoint, but ideally you're looking at what are your business needs, what is the customer needs, your users, and then instead I have the second line. I have users going all over the place, right? Going to Box, Trello, whatever they could get their hands on. So ideally, think about people, think about the work that needs to happen, and then see what your migration should be in order to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
That's what it should be. What do you think?
I'll throw some into as well. I mean, I've been involved since SharePoint 2001, and I remember that when you used to do migration from 2000, well, there was no real good migration path from 2001 2003, so you just threw everything away, started
At
over,
least.
which people still do that many times. But when people did that and they went, it was almost like going through the motions and saying, okay, well, we need to do it because Microsoft has put it out, and we
Changed
just
version.
have to do it, just for the sake of change. And no one really understood the analytics. Customers didn't understand it. Microsoft didn't understand it. And I
Yeah.
believe all that stuff changed a lot when BPOS was formed and eventually Microsoft 365 was formed because now Microsoft became the tenant and saying, holy crap, we're looking at the usage is like really down there for some of these things that we thought that was
Yeah.
great. So now we got to get really serious about it. And I think that's when we started
100%.
seeing so much focus on user adoption, user engagement, understanding what do people want? What do they care about? Not what do we care about as vendors, what do people care about? And I'm
And
so
how do they
glad
work?
you're doing that.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
agree. I think most of the times, like you said, when we were migrating from one version to another, we often left things as they were. We expected the new software to make us work better
Yeah.
instead of thinking how can we work better and then seeing what new software could help us support that model, right? And
Absolutely.
now it changes with Microsoft 365 because Microsoft pushes also at the same time as it changes things.
Yeah, and we were a Salesforce customers even before Microsoft 365 came into being, so we were kind of
Mhm.
used to the whole SaaS model. But
Yep.
folks who were not used to it as much, they're like, "Whoa, you're gonna change things around on a regular basis? Like, hang on a second." And that
Pretty
still is a
much.
mindset, but that's the reality, and that's gonna stay.
That's how it
So
works.
let me ask you another one over here. I've noticed one of the articles, Ben, you mentioned that migration, and I'll read it exactly word by word. Migration is
Yep.
only the beginning. Deploying and scaling collaborative solutions like Microsoft Teams requires a well-defined strategy and consistent effort on the part of IT. Can you expand on that, please?
Oh, yeah. And I separated into three categories because after so many, in the first years especially, and it's really because of our telemetry actually that we could see that. But people would tell me, yeah, we're on Microsoft 3 or Office 365 back then, but they're in Office 365. And I'm like, okay. And I start talking to them and I realized that, yeah, they're technically on Office 365, but they're just like they were before. So I would call that the shifting from on-premises to online. And then you got to move from online to the modern workplace or whatever this year's buzzword will be, but to switch from online to changing how you work. So there's actually another migration that we see all the time. Ideally, you can think about it before, and as you go, you land, and we can discuss that as well. But what I meant is moving to Office 365 is just the first part, just like moving to your new house and having all your boxes set up. It's just the first part. Now you got to figure out how are you going to reorganize everything
you read my
to
mind.
be your new
I was
home.
thinking the exact same scenario. Oh my God. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, really?
I was thinking about boxes. I was thinking about houses. I'm like, oh my God, you said it.
Oh, there you go. Great minds. No, but seriously, this is what we see is that the people migrate, and it's fine. Again, nothing to say it's bad or it's good. It's just the way that often we see it. And so after, to be able to switch, because you moved everything, and there's already a big change for users because now things look different. There's modern SharePoint, maybe. Maybe there's recommendations for no more subsites carrying everybody and how we should. And then at the same time, you're trying to shift how you work to this whole new model. It's a lot of effort, consistent effort all the time. So
I'll take that analogy to the next step over here. Because, oh my God, this is so ridiculous that I was saying about the exact same thing when you were saying that. I was thinking about, here's a house. I moved my boxes from this house to that house, but I don't unpack it. I just leave it. I have moved. Right? So I took all this stuff and I moved it here. Now, expand on this analogy a little bit further. I moved the boxes and I also moved my family. So my wife and kids, everybody's there. Now my wife understands, I understand why we moved. We're the admins. But the kids, they're confused, like, why do we just do this right now? What are we doing here, right? And they don't like it. Kids don't like change. And I know, I can know for a fact, I got 3 of them, right? So now the kids are here in the new house and they're like, okay, I'm looking around and what's in it for me? And you think about this as employees, same thing over there. You don't explain to them and you just take them from place to place. And they're like, okay, why am I doing this? What am I doing? Why am I here? And you got
there's a couple of things that may change too, right? Because before, your 3 kids might have been sharing the same room, but now you got to rethink. Yeah, maybe now there's 3 rooms. Maybe now we split who's going in the basement and why. and so we could go this very far, but you get the idea of having moved to the new location is about the first part. But yeah, I think I'm going on too much on this, but there's definitely a 2-piece migration, and you need to think about, have you shifted to online? And then what are you going to do next to shift into this new way of work? Whatever you want to take from that, but how do you shift to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes it does happen, as you mentioned before, that, as part of the first answer, that's the should and the must sometimes are different. Like, oh, well, we must move. So our lease has expired on the other house, and we have to get out. And that's what happens many times from SharePoint to SharePoint or SharePoint to SharePoint Online.
So in the last year, it was distributed work, right? Make it work remotely now.
SharePoint 2010 is happening right now where, it's going to be, hey, not supported. So let's go ahead and move it. Like, we'll think about other stuff later, but that's just not the best way. Let's talk about this a little bit further. So SharePoint on-prem still remains a product. You got SharePoint 2019 as the main product for server, and you got SharePoint Online. And someone was just talking about that a little bit earlier also. Well, what about the differences? Is there a place where I can see all the differences? Or also the pros and cons of all of them? And honestly, I didn't have a good answer.
I haven't found a good answer, and it's in Microsoft's interest to probably not have too much of a, make it look like it's always, not bring too much attention to the on-premises versions of SharePoint. I think they put it there, and for the specific people that are going to go and request it, they'll be like, yeah, here's the DVD. But I don't think we should expect them to have, excessive communication and how is this comparable. They're not trying to have it be known. And I'm seeing it, we talked about my telemetry a little bit. When I look at migration in the last year and the prior year as where the destination is, which version of SharePoint. I don't know. Do you want me to bring it up?
Yeah, let's bring it up. Let's bring it up.
Let me change screen here, press on share, make sure I got the right one. Now, mind you, this is, it's coming, share.
Yeah.
There, you should see my little on-premises. Okay, so this is ShareGate live telemetry. So don't I try to hide as much as I could. I hide the numbers on the left, but this is true numbers, right? And what you're seeing here, when you see the little dotted lines, it's the same as the filled line, but the year prior. So in this case, I'm kind of showing you in purple the migrations to on-premises by destination version. So I'm showing you how many of our users migrated, total users, right? How many of them migrated to 2013 this year? And forget this part, we had a little bug in our product. So for 2 months, we had some issues with telemetry. So let's start here and let's kind of see. And the year before, we actually had more people going towards SharePoint 2013. But if we look at 2016, also going down from the year before. And 2019 is higher than the year before, but still much lower than people going to 2013. So as we're speaking right now, January 2021, there's more people migrating towards. And just for you to be clear, a migration means the source is different than the destination. I'm excluding people moving things around within their environment. I'm talking about real migrations. Source destination is not the same farm. And so, or source.
Same source.
So in this case, I'm telling you that in 2021, there's still like almost double the amount of people going to 2013 than there are people going to 2019.
That's mind-boggling. Yeah, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect this. Doesn't seem logical, but that's the fact.
That's how it is. And we have thousands of people live in our application every month. Yeah. This is a lot of numbers nonetheless.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing that many times you hear things from Microsoft about here's the coolest stuff that's not even out there. It's going to be out sometime in the future.
Yeah.
But then you talk to your real customers and they're in a very different world altogether. Like, I don't really care about that stuff yet. Yes, that's going to be maybe 10 years from now for us. For Microsoft, it's a reality now, but for us, maybe 10 years from now. And you got to.
Yeah, I would tell you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say that, we're assuming also that if people are migrating towards on-premises, they're not also going to Office 365. And this is something I dived into because I was kind of curious when I was seeing, the 2019 is rising though. People are more, I think, especially for that next bid, which is a lot more people are looking into a hybrid model. I think 80 to 90% of the investment is in Microsoft 365 because what I showed you, it's the quantity of users. Sure. It's not necessarily how much they're migrating. So if one person comes and does one move of files into my SharePoint 2013, it counts as +1 for my graphs.
Gotcha.
So it could be people are migrating a whole lot more in 2019, but more people are migrating a couple of, I don't know. I could know, but I don't have that graph on hand.
It's more about
I can tell you that about 20% of our customers, they're migrating to both on-premises and Office 365, telling me that they do have both environment.
Absolutely. And you think about it as to what is the mindset of folks who are staying or migrating to on-prem. And many times it's just a requirement. It could be the DoD, could be some European
hospitals. They want to make sure that if everything goes down, they have something else. So absolutely, I think from what we're seeing is that they have a high investment in Microsoft Cloud with Microsoft 365 to work differently, like we talked about, like embrace new ways of work. Which is interesting. I think recent Gartner analysts said, really from surveys, that about close to 70% of people on Office 365 now are saying that they're there for new ways of working. Whereas before, even last year, the number was a lot lower for that. Instead, what people answering was, we're working like we were before. So, our first story, moving to online, and then moving to new ways of work. People in the past have often been just moving to online, and now we can see a really big shift. But they still need the on-prem for just in case.
Yeah, it's a lot more behavior change than just the change for the sake of change, obviously, at the end.
We got forced into behavior change.
And, this question I was going to ask later, but let's just bring it up right now, that is SharePoint on-prem ever going to go away?
That's the greatest question of all time, right? What do you think?
My thought and it's actually a fact that in this case, it's very much dependent on the big tap customers of Microsoft. If they say, you know what, Microsoft, you have to stay here because this is where I have to be, and you must support me, Microsoft is going to do it. It's just a fact. That's always been like that, and I think they're doing the right thing by doing that. Because
Absolutely.
there's certain criteria where people have around the world, not just the United States, also where they must stay at least a portion of it because of sensitivity reasons, because of culture, because of so many different things, within on-prem environment.
Exactly. So I think it'll be a customer. The customers will let Microsoft know whether or not they can stop. Right.
So I don't really see that happening for a long, long time from now.
No, I'm pretty sure that
between that
it's easy for them, right? They can just take a piece of Office 365 and bring it back into a DVD, so to speak. There, but they can bring a piece and say, okay, we're going to take SharePoint, we're going to bring it back down. So
yeah, I've not touched a DVD in a long time. You mentioned that twice already. Like everything that
it's
I do
just
is
how I
streamed.
imagine it. Every time I install the SharePoint server, I had the .iso file, which for me it's the DVD.
Seriously, I don't even have a DVD player in my house anymore. It's so crazy. I just everything is
that's even my laptop doesn't have anything to put any sort of device. It's crazy.
All right, let's go on to the next thing over here. So a question I had written down over here, I want to talk to you about what kind of user adoption do you think Microsoft 365 is seeing out there in the world? We're talking about obviously the usage of
for sure.
365.
I've had some good conversations recently, so without sharing anything that's NDA. That's always the trick, right? But we know, obviously, we can put Teams out of the way because we know Teams is the thing, right? So I think the last stats were showing that over half of the people that are using Office 365 in a month are also using Microsoft Teams. So clearly top used app. I'm not worried about that. But Teams is, as Satya said in a recent Financial Times article, it's the new internet. And what he meant was it's essentially the fabric or something that pulls everything else that we work with together. Mm-hmm. So it's an organizing layer. Like your browser has tabs to other websites, kind of like what Teams does. So let's put Teams aside. I think SharePoint is still very high with Outlook and Exchange because of Teams and because we know it. So these are still very, very high up. OneDrive still, I think OneDrive went like super high usage, and now the high usage is just, that's how it is. No one cares. Not that no one cares. It's just
expected.
It's expected. It's just OneDrive. It's just where my emails go. It's where, my attachments. It's where I put my draft documents here and there. So OneDrive is kind of just expected. What I think we're seeing is a huge increase in things that we may not even think about. So Microsoft Forms, actually, everywhere I go, we don't talk about forms, but everywhere I go, I see forms.office.com with a hyperlink for a survey, for things. Yeah. I see it in companies. I see people posting on Twitter to get surveys. We do it. I'm like, I can definitely tell you that there's probably a lot of high usage of forms. I think planners probably. I don't know if is your question about usage or people using what products? Or are you talking about a deeper sense of adoption? Just to make sure I answer the right question.
No, it's most about, all these things are there and I bought the package, am I using the whole package or not? And yes, that includes all the different things, right? So most of the companies, are they actually getting utilization of all these things, or they're just paying for licensing?
I don't know how much I'm supposed to share Gartner stuff, because I never know when I download the report. But let's say, hey, let's just share a number, just not talk about it too much on Twitter. But they said about people use about 16 out of 33 apps. So let's say they could find 33 different apps. People are currently using 16 of them. But I don't know. I don't remember if they include like Word, Excel, PowerPoint as 3, because I know often they put it as different things. But you have Outlook, there's a lot of products. We definitely don't use all of them, but because they're starting to get fused, people don't realize they're using them. So ever since Planner was integrated into Teams, there's a huge increase in usage, and we see it through our other product called Apricot, because we're helping people manage their environment.
That's right.
So we're just seeing how people are doing things. Yeah. And we can see that ever since Planner's really been a big part of Teams, there's been an increase in usage for Planner. So people might not realize it. Forms, definitely high usage. Power Automate is, if I were going to bet something, I would probably bet on that for the next, because workflows are starting to get, our dear SharePoint workflows. I remember, I think that's how one of the main things that I know you from whereas how much work and effort you had put out there to help people with SharePoint workflows.
Oh yeah.
Definitely a lot of good stuff there. But yeah, I think definitely pulling things out of workflows to rethink, and this is the important part we were talking about earlier, rethink your process and then building it in a new modern way, which will be with Power Automate or Flows and the other products. So those are my big ones. I'm skeptical about Power Apps. I feel it's a missed opportunity for the audience. Pure opinion.
Sure.
I love everyone that works there, so it feels a bit bad saying it, but I feel that there is a need for Power Apps, but the app is built for the wrong person. And
bingo. And you're reading my mind again. I was gonna say something, but go ahead.
And I kept giving them feedback about it. At some point, I'm like, look, I sound like the bad guy always giving feedback, so I'm just gonna stop. But I think there's an immense need for Power Apps. Yeah. But I can barely use that app. It's so complex. So I can only imagine, right, the people at work right now that are asking me about things that normally I would tell them Power Apps, but because I know what, who they are, what they do, and I know Power Apps, I'm like,
So, it's true. Back in the day, I used to do a lot for workflows and forms. That was like my main thing. And I have even consulted to Microsoft folks themselves as to taught them how to do it, even though some of them were actually creating the products. I was very, very, very much in depth with it. I wrote a bunch of books on SharePoint Designer stuff, InfoPath.
Yeah, I remember.
Power Apps. Yeah. So when Power Apps and Power Automate came out, definitely I'm still bullish about them. But having said that, let's talk about Power Apps specifically. I looked at my audience that was in InfoPath, and there still are, some of them are still there. And they were able to do things really, really easily and quickly and efficiently. And it just was intuitive. And that was the people who were in the power user category or end user category. Now you give Power Apps to power users and end users. End users are out like that. They're like, whoa, I don't get it. This is not me. I can't do this stuff.
Yeah.
Power users are still sticking around, but there's stuff when they hit the scene like, oh, I can't do this in here. I can't do this. It's a little bit more complex. I have to write some script in here. I have to do some of that stuff in there. Developers coming in, they find it extremely easy because you have a developer mindset. You're like, oh, that's so much easier than working in C# Visual Studio, all that kind of stuff, right? PHP and everything else. But the audience, like you're saying, the audience that was really bullish on doing it with InfoPath, with the end user, power user audience, they're still struggling after so many years. Yeah. My advice was the same that you were giving to Microsoft way at that time when they were coming. Guys, you got to go for this audience. But it didn't work out that way, unfortunately.
I feel like they went backwards and started from the technology they had and now said, like, who can we build this for? And it's too bad because now it's like, oh, well, maybe you can customize a SharePoint list, but that's not, the form, the new item form. Like,
a lot more.
It's not exactly what they want, and it's too bad because I feel like there's a huge, huge opportunity still out there.
Yeah.
If they just built it. Oh, well.
So, who's capitalizing on the opportunity right now? The ISVs that are capitalizing on the opportunity, who they're saying, listen, InfoPath, Intuitive, you have it, but it's not supported anymore. So you got to go somewhere. You go to Power Apps or you come to us. And they're actually getting a lot of customers from that. Yep. So kudos for them to jumping on it. I just wish Microsoft did a little bit better job on it as well. But hey, that's just an opinion of a couple of us, right? It is what it is.
Exactly.
So you named a lot of good applications, which I completely believe in. In our own company at VisualSP, we use all of them with Teams, Planner, OneDrive, Stream, Yammer, SharePoint Exchange, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Power Apps, everything.
Yeah.
One thing we don't use, and I'll just throw this out there also and see what your reaction is Sway.
Oh, I forgot that was gonna. That needs to go if it's still there.
There are certain people that I've met who love Sway.
Really?
I remember, not like this many. At conferences also, I used to ask in my section, like, how many people are using Sway? And I get nobody or like one person after 5 or 6 sessions that I
don't even know it exists. I expect it's going to get sunset at some point.
It's possible. Or maybe some kind of a migration where PowerPoint and Sway kind of merge. That would be pretty awesome also.
Perhaps. It depends what value because that's, in product, it's always about how much money is this going to cost me? What am I going to get? And if nobody's really using it, it's not worth money of integration because it costs quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
But no, I would expect it to be sunset. And usually one thing that tells me what works and what doesn't work is migrations. Because do you know how many people ask us for like, can you please support this? Can you please support this? Can you please support this? You know what we've never heard?
Sway.
Support Sway. And it's not, again, it's not mean, because I know maybe somebody who's watching us right now is thinking, well, I'm using Sway and I love Sway. And that's fine. It's fair. I'm just saying we do not get requests. We request to migrate planners. We get requests to migrate Yammer. All these other things that people want, but Sway, I forgot about that product.
It's a cool product, but it doesn't have that 9 times effect of what I have currently. It's 9 times better, and that's usually what you need according to research to make a change. And I've not found a change either. I was in it in the beginning. I'm like, okay, let's check it out. Got into it, did a few. I'm like,
did a few sways. Everybody did a few sways.
Yeah, I swayed a little bit in the beginning, but then I
went back to our PowerPoints.
Couldn't get it completely swayed afterwards. I'm like, okay, PowerPoint is good. And PowerPoint, they've been doing a lot of cool stuff also with the design ideas and everything else.
Really good
presenters. As presenters, so much easier. Let's click a button, design ideas, boom. It's so cool.
I know,
all right, let's move on to the next thing over here. This is really cool.
Yes.
Now, migration itself is very hard. That's just a fact. As companies start out fresh with fresh infrastructures and fresh architectures, what advice would you have for them so the next time around they don't make the same mistakes and it's easier migration?
So I want to make sure I understand. People that have fresh architecture, do you mean that people that are already on Office 365 or?
Well, let me repeat on that. So many times I hear this thing that we're going to start fresh. I mean, usually what that means is we're going to take our documents, we're going to take some very, very important pages, and we're just going to dump everything or leave everything behind, and that's it. But unfortunately, the same kind of stuff happens again and again.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, we're going to do it better next time. But that next time doesn't come. It's just the same story again. Would you have any advice for folks to have an easier migration the next time around? Even if it's tenant to tenant migration, where we're going from this tenant to that tenant, or on-prem to online, or whatever. That's
a really good question.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever really thought about it, because it's hard to say. I think obviously one of the main ones is, and it's counterintuitive, is to stay away from custom investments. But it depends which ones, and that's the problem.
That's the thing. Depends.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, no, you kind of do need to have some customizations. And if you use the SharePoint framework and you give, I guess, follow Microsoft's guidance as much as possible, especially now that you're Microsoft 365 and you're likely going to stay there or do a tenant to tenant, is to follow the guidance that they have for how to use their products. And they've documented that. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, it is kind of goes into, like we were talking about before, about the biggest migration failures and any kind of mistakes that you've already made that you don't want to make again, right? Yeah. Customization is definitely a big part of it. Having said that,
workflows too, we see.
Yeah, that's not so many things like that where it feels like it's a requirement. We have to do it. My boss is saying that I have to do it, and then you do it, and then 2-3 years down the line, like, well, now how do I take this over? And there's no clear migration path, so you gotta start over again. Some of these things are necessary evil. You just have to do it. What can you avoid, I guess, is the main thing. Is there anything that, okay, well, here's my choice, and I can avoid, making the wrong choices to give me at least the best option the next time around, where to be able to do an easier migration?
You know what? My brain is stuck on one thing that I don't think is the answer, but I'm having a hard time stepping away from it. So I'm just going to say it out loud. But again, I don't think it fits into your question.
That's right.
But I've got so many people that did like top-down structures. So we have to have a site under a site under a site under a site. And now that they need to go to the next one, they can't use teams, they can't use groups. They're kind of stuck with the structure that they decided was the one to go. So I don't know. I'm having a stuck one on that. I think it always comes down to listen to people, but look at the guidance of the technology at the same time.
Actually, this is a really good answer. I was talking to Sue Hanley about this before also, and she says the same thing. I agree that, the whole sub-site structure, back in the day, we thought this was the best way to do it. I remember one of the biggest insurance companies, I don't want to name exactly which one, but back in 2003 even, they saw this thing coming like, we don't want to use sub-site, we're just going to use top sites, we're going to have some structures, so it's easier. And every time they migrated, it's always been easier for them.
Yeah.
Because then otherwise,
the less you go down,
Yes, you
The
got those
easier.
dependencies, and you don't want you want the architecture to be where there's a parent and child and hub sites and stuff that can make that happen.
You could create a fake structure.
You got it.
Yeah.
It has to be modular enough where I could take it apart if I need to and then
Yeah.
restructure. I shouldn't be stuck.
No, that makes me think of development. So the way we develop software, as developers go, is the best way to do it for them is really to make everything modular.
Yes.
So that in the future, if anything changes, if the product managers decide we're going somewhere else,
You got it.
they got the pieces that they can reorganize and restructure. So I guess you're right. The biggest takeaway or the best recommendation is try to be as modular as you can with the things that you build for your users, for your customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly, I think, the thing that has been proven again and again. And it's not just from migration from a version to version, but it's also migration from I got merged, our companies got merged, or we got acquired or something, and I need to migrate because of that, because of an event that has happened. So that's going to happen. You're going to have two ITs now. What are you going to do? We got an IT structure here. I get two marketing structure. How do you put it together? So if it's all modular in nature, it's just much easier to make those connections.
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Let's go on to the next thing over here. What do you think are the biggest pain points that you see customers and people you talk to about that they complain about the most? And this is a little bit more generic in nature. Like the biggest pain points that you still see.
Biggest pain points. I mean, I'm going to be the first one is the easiest one is Microsoft throttling. When people are we talking about migrations?
Anything actually.
Okay. Because if I was going to say migrations, I would say throttling. I was going to say all the problems that people are having when they're trying to migrate and plan everything out because and trying to shift things the right way. I think otherwise the biggest pain points that people have is the it's a weird one because for me it's positive, but I can understand why it could be a negative thing, and that's the speed of change that Microsoft has with their software. So that can be overwhelming if that's not your main focus to take care of productivity. But I say that, and it can make people feel defensive because they're like, no, I'm full-time, I'm doing it all the time, but I've got 3,000, 5,000 users, and it's hard work to make that change management, right? If something changes, and you know that very well, right?
Absolutely.
Apologies.
Right.
I'm fine, by the way.
The world we live in, you gotta say,
it's crazy. But I think a big part is really accompanying users through the changes that the technology bring that impacts their work. So the fact that Teams suddenly has an update and everything's changed for their meetings already has an impact, and IT has to make sure to support that. So I guess the biggest challenge that I hear about, actually we did another research recently, and that's one of the top threes. The top three that came was the deployment and adoption of Microsoft Teams. Well, the adoption was a separate one, but number two, and it's getting people to use everything well. And I don't mean Teams, capital T, not the chat app with the video meetings. The new way we're working right now that has everything, right? So capital T Teams with using everything is one of the main challenges, and the speed that the updates are getting from Microsoft is the big challenge. And then everything else is guidance. So I put it through because a lot of the research people said governance tools or management, and ultimately for me that's guiding people to the right usage, and that's adoption again, right? So that I feel the big challenges. But I feel like I should let you talk on this topic a little bit more. Probably no more.
The people side of the story obviously is the most important side of the story. We cannot ignore that. We have ignored that in the past for a long, long time, and we paid the price for it. It's like I always think about this analogy of having a huge jumbo jet that you're looking like, oh, look in the sky, there's a beautiful jumbo jet, and you don't know there's nobody inside. It's empty. What's the point? You're burning all this fuel and you got all this stuff going. And yes, as far as the pain point is concerned, it does remain for most people that I talk to also as to how do I manage all this change that I can't control. If Azure is down, or if Azure has changed, or my SharePoint stuff has changed, Teams has changed, and my users come to me like, hey, IT gal, IT guy, what's going on? Like, I don't know. I'm at the same kind of mercy as you are as to what happened. Here's a quick story on this thing. Something that actually happened was myself, Dan Holmes, Susan Hanley, and Jasper, all of us in Netherlands doing a workshop. and it was my turn to do a workshop on the next morning. It was like 2-day workshop or something. So at night, late at night, I'm in Netherlands, so this is morning over there, night over here, that kind of stuff, right? At night over there, I'm preparing for all this stuff. I prepare my demo, my recording, all that stuff. Next morning, I fire it up. It's changed. I'm like, what the heck? This is like the next morning, and I'm like, okay. So my Seattle has changed something, and now it just screwed up my demo completely. I can't do that anymore. And you see that. So Dan is with me. He's with Microsoft, of course. He can't control it. All these people are like, we're supposed to be on top of it, but we can't. It's just not possible.
No, it just rolls out. It's all independent product teams, and they're releasing the things that they're releasing.
Change is inevitable. Yeah. So the whole user adoption thing, which is going to be my last question anyway, so let's just jump into that, is what advice do both of us have in this case as to how do you best support your users? Especially now, it's not just the change, but it's also change, and it's happening, and you're working at home many times. So you're kind of segregated to begin with. How do you best support your users so they don't feel that loneliness and like, oh my God, I can't even talk to someone and express my frustration or ask my question? User adoption is very necessary.
I think we both believe in the same thing. We just approach it differently. So we're probably aligned. We'll see what you say. Because I find, and I've asked this question. I have tons of surveys. I just got a research survey back with like 500-600 people responding. And I see it split in the middle, 50-50. Every time. I've been doing this same question survey for like 3-4 years. And it's something about, it's along the lines of self-service. And what I mean by that, and I'll get to what I mean.
Sure.
Is you've got companies that lock everything down and make IT the bottleneck or the funnel, because I don't want to sound negative. Some people must go through this, it's fine. And then you got the other companies that are more like everybody create whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I really believe that it's in the middle. And it's hard to get to. And of course, you could argue, okay, Ben, you're trying to pitch your tool. I don't want to pitch my tool, but it's what I believe in. And I believe that, at least from my perspective, I go up about it through IT. And instead of making a funnel, and instead of forcing everyone to ask you what settings, or you going to block them to put the settings, it's really about tech touch guidance. That means that you use the scale of technology that's available to you, the number of teams getting created, the number of groups getting created, and you find a way. Don't buy a third party, it's fine. Find a way to nudge people, right? Yeah. To just nudge them into the right usage as they go along. And the right usage being the one you want for your company. I'm not saying there's one right usage, but I strongly don't believe in completely locking down everything. And I understand in some cases you have to work with companies where this is how it is. So I understand the realities, but if you can, to try and go closer to the middle than staying on the two edges. What do you think?
We're completely aligned in that, and I'll
that's what I thought.
I'll throw some analogy in there also. Keeping the companies aside, the organizations that have tight regulations, which I completely respect, but if you have a choice, then think about this thing in a very human way. Yeah. So if you have kids, which once again I have 3 of them, you think about how would you treat them? If you lock them down completely, you know what's going to happen, right?
Escape from the
revolution. Escape from that stuff. Now, on the other hand, if you say, do whatever the heck you want, I don't care. You know what's going to happen?
Chaos.
Chaos. Like, all right, Dad doesn't care. Watching TV till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
School, forget school. We're not going. Right? You can't do either one. You got to find the common ground. But that common ground comes with, first of all, what is the needs of your company culture? In my case, my family culture. What is it? Where are we trying to get to? Within that culture, let's draw some boundaries. But the boundaries should not be like this. It cannot be like, okay, just do this and don't ask questions. The boundaries got to be something like that. There's really cool books which talk about, you know what? You got to think about this as a route you're taking. It doesn't matter, airplane, car, whatever. It's a route. And in that route, you are going to swivel. It's going to happen. It's going to go like that. But you got to have that road or that pathway where you have the wiggle room. And as long as you're in path, going to the right thing, that's okay. Let yourself wiggle a little bit. Let your passengers wiggle a little bit.
I agree.
It gives them that creative freedom to also express themselves and to get to where it is. So it applies to kids. I think it equally applies really, really well to employees as well, in my humble opinion.
I 100% agree. And we're seeing it, again, it's going to sound cheesy, but through our app, again, through Sherry at Apricot, what we really see is the usage of that. So we see as IT administrators, and we have a few thousand people using it. So I'm actually seeing the impact of it. I'm seeing that people that are starting to in our aspect, what we do is there's certain things that the IT can say, this things I want the owners to be able to do themselves and report back to me when they do it, or to make sure it's all good. And we're seeing that those groups will actually use more of the products available because they feel like, okay, I'm in the right guidance, right? So I do believe, and we do see it as a good trend.
Yeah, same thing from the user side of things. Us at VisualSP, we see that as well, where you have the creative freedom, or you have the freedom to move around, and you kind of leave it to the users as to, all right, here's a help tools, including VisualSP or something like that. Use it, and then you get a lot of data of people searching for things. You're like, oh, so that's what people's on their mind, and you watch the behavior, and it teaches you so much about what their intent is. Because when you ask them, many times they don't tell you as much as they show you with their behavior. So it's, at the end of the day, it's all about people. It's all about people, and I think we all agree on that.
Always.
So, awesome conversation, Ben. This is
always
any
always a
last
pleasure.
Words?
No, I was gonna say stay school now. Last words. No, I think one of my big takeaways from this call, actually, that I never realized myself, is to the modular approach we were talking about. Forget the words we actually come up with. Just to make sure that you are future-proof. I think that's the word that often is used in the English language. I'm always I'm French first, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, yeah. No, I think that's my main takeaway, just because I had not thought about it before, and that really is a takeaway for me, to be honest, in this call.
Well, thanks so much for being with me and sharing this time together. I think this is awesome.
Appreciate it again. Always a pleasure.
I'm sure all the folks watching, thanks very much for being with us. Let us know if you have any other questions. And
reach out anytime.
Yeah, definitely reach out. Ben and I are both pretty accessible on Twitter, LinkedIn, other places. So reach out.
Absolutely.
Don't be shy. And hopefully this was a good use of your time. So thanks so much. Take care.
Cheers.